I gave up my life to care for my husband for 20 years, only to find out he was faking his pain and calling me his free maid with benefits. Maria had once believed in fairy tales. Not the kind with castles or magic spells, but the kind where love alone could weather any storm. 20 years ago, when her husband Daniel's accident turned their world upside down, she stood firm. Spinal cord injury. Paralysis from the waist down. Doctors gave him the news. Maria never left his side. Friends told her to reconsider. Her mother warned her, "You're too young to give up everything." But Maria didn't see it that way. She saw it as loyalty. At first it was hard. The daily care, the emotional weight, the complete reversal of their lives. Daniel had once been athletic, independent, full of charm. Now he depended on her for everything: bathing, feeding, dressing, cleaning. Maria gave up her job offer at a boutique bakery to become his full-time caregiver. 1 month became 1 year. 1 year became 2. Time blurred. She learned how to manage medical schedules, injections, physical therapy routines. She learned how to lift his body without injuring herself, how to feed him with a smile, even when she was exhausted. She kept the house spotless. She handled bills, appointments, and the isolation that came with being tied to a man who no longer had the will to live, let alone appreciate. There were good days in the beginning. Daniel smiled sometimes. He thanked her, held her hand, even apologized for being a burden. But as the years passed, bitterness grew where love once lived. He spoke less, demanded more. He stopped noticing her new haircut or the small cake she'd bake from leftover ingredients just to feel something from her old life. He became impatient, then dismissive, then cold. Still, Maria stayed. Because that's what you do when you love someone. Or at least, that's what she kept telling herself. Even when her back ached from lifting him, even when he sighed heavily if dinner was 10 minutes late, even when he stopped saying, "Thank you." She stopped wearing makeup, stopped looking in mirrors. Her reflection felt unfamiliar. Tired eyes, lines that hadn't been there before, hair that used to bounce but now sat dull and flat. Time hadn't just passed, it had been sacrificed. Then came the day Nurse Jamie was assigned to update Daniel's care system. A newer model with remote tracking and a small surveillance feature meant to alert caregivers in case of emergencies. Jamie was bright, kind, and fast. She joked with Maria while installing the devices, noting how rare it was to see a spouse so devoted after all these years. "Most people don't last," Jamie said lightly. Maria only smiled. Later that evening, Daniel was unusually quiet. His eyes followed Jamie until she left. As soon as the door shut, he became anxious. Grabbing his phone, he wheeled himself into the living room, not noticing that Maria was in the hallway. She had paused to wipe a spill on the kitchen floor. His voice drifted through the air, casual and amused. "No, man, she's still here. 20 years, bro. I mean, she's basically my free maid with benefits." The words didn't register at first. Maria thought she had misheard. She froze, blood draining from her face, waiting to hear more. Silence, followed by laughter, his laughter. And then a reply she couldn't make out, followed by Daniel's muttered agreement. "Yeah, I got her locked down." Something inside her cracked. She quietly stepped away, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. Her hands trembled. She hadn't felt that kind of shaking since the day of his accident. But this wasn't fear. It was something colder, something sharper. She said nothing that night. Daniel didn't seem to notice. He asked for dinner. She served it. He dropped his fork. She picked it up. He turned on the TV. She sat beside him, without watching. In bed, she lay still, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. 20 years. 2 decades of caregiving, loyalty, devotion. All reduced to a joke. A transaction. The next morning, Jamie called. There had been a glitch in the camera setup. The emergency monitoring device had recorded several hours of footage after installation. Would Maria like a copy before they reset it? She said yes, without thinking. Something in her gut told her she needed to see. Alone at the kitchen table, she opened the file. The footage was quiet. The nurse leaving. Daniel checking the door. Then, to her shock, he pulled himself up with the help of a nearby pole. Wobbly but standing. A few steps. Limping, not dragging. Then collapsing into his chair just before Maria appeared. Maria rewound the footage. Watched again. This time slower. The lift, the steps, the timing. It was staged. Practiced. Later in the video, his brother appeared on a video call. Maria turned the volume up. Daniel smirked, flexing his shoulders. She still thinks I can't move below the waist. Let her. Makes it easier. His brother laughed. Damn, man. That's messed up. Daniel shrugged. It's survival, bro. She wants to play nurse forever, I'll let her. She gave up her life, I didn't ask her to. Maria sat back in her chair. Her pulse was ice. Her heart didn't pound. It just sank. He had lied. For how long, she didn't know. But the emotional abuse was no longer a vague discomfort. It was now undeniable. She closed the laptop, stood up, and began to plan. Not out of revenge, but out of clarity. She would not scream. She would not beg for explanation. She would not cry in front of him. But she would leave. And this time, she would not look back. Maria didn't cry. She didn't throw things. She didn't confront Daniel. Instead, she moved through her routine like nothing had changed. Breakfast at 8, medications at 9, sponge bath by 10. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, but her eyes were distant, focused on something far beyond the living room walls. She stopped asking how he slept. She stopped folding his socks the way he liked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She listened for more whispers, more phone calls. Daniel seemed oblivious. Comfortable. Confident. Every time he barked a request, she heard it differently now. Every sigh, every grunt of impatience, it all sounded like entitlement. Not need. She saw the man he'd become, not the one she once loved. Not the man who used to write notes in her lunchbox or play guitar for her on Sundays. That man had disappeared long ago. She watched the video again later that night. Not to feel pain, but to confirm resolve. She zoomed in on his posture, how easily he moved when he thought no one was watching. She noted the lack of tremble in his legs, the way he laughed when mocking her. She downloaded the footage onto a flash drive. Labeled it House Logs in case he ever found it. Then she hid it inside a shoebox beneath the linen closet. Just in case. She began keeping notes. A folder in her phone, password protected. Every able-bodied movement he made. The strength in his arms when lifting himself, the way he tilted his chair to stretch his back, the subtle toe twitch she once thought was an accident. It wasn't. None of it was. Maria started waking up earlier, before sunrise. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a yellow legal pad, jotting down numbers. Rent estimates. Resume updates. Local job postings. Her old coworker, Nadine, had messaged her a year ago about a part-time kitchen opening. Maria had ignored it at the time. She messaged her back. Nadine responded within the hour. You still got hands like gold, Maria. Come by. Talk to the owner. Maria didn't reply immediately. She looked over at Daniel, asleep in his chair, mouth slightly open, completely unaware that the person wiping his drool had finally opened her eyes. 2 days later, Maria visited the bakery under the pretense of grocery shopping. She wore jeans and lipstick for the first time in months. Nadine hugged her like no time had passed. The kitchen smelled of butter and flour, and Maria felt something stir inside her, a sense of familiarity, a warmth she had buried long ago. The owner asked for a trial bake. Maria tied an apron, rolled her sleeves, and within minutes her hands were dancing through dough, her eyes calm, her face focused. The bread came out golden and perfect. They offered her a position on the spot. Part-time for now. No pressure. She asked for a week to decide. She returned home before Daniel noticed. When he asked where she'd been, she said, pharmacy lines were long. He didn't question it. Why would he? In his mind, she was predictable, anchored, owned. But his tone shifted. He began asking more questions. Where she was going, how long she'd be gone, why dinner was reheated instead of fresh. She lied easily now. Her guilt had disappeared. Maria started packing small things. A few blouses, her cookbooks, a stack of family photos from before the accident. She cleared out the second drawer in the bedroom dresser. She knew he wouldn't notice. Daniel hadn't touched that drawer in years. One night, he knocked a glass of water off the table. Maria didn't rush. She let it spill. She met his glare, without flinching. "You getting tired of this?" he asked, half smirking. She stared at the puddle. "Just thinking," she replied. "About what?" he said, trying to sound amused. "About what freedom really costs." He didn't ask again. The next morning, Maria called a lawyer. Quietly, carefully. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want the house or assets. She just wanted to know how to leave without being accused of abandonment. The lawyer told her everything she needed to hear. She documented her years of unpaid caregiving, her bank statements, the surveillance footage. Legally, she owed him nothing. Daniel's brother called one evening. Maria answered by habit. "You still with him?" he asked, casual as always. "I am." He laughed. "Didn't think you had the spine to leave." Maria didn't respond. Just handed the phone to Daniel and walked away. She stood in the hallway, listening. The conversation was short. Laughter, again. She heard Daniel say, "She's not going anywhere." That night, she looked in the mirror for a long time. Her eyes looked older, wiser. Not sad anymore, clear. She started waking up with a sense of urgency. She filed paperwork, arranged appointments with caregiving agencies, and set aside cash every time she bought groceries. She hid envelopes beneath loose floorboards. Her hands no longer trembled when she prepared meals. She wasn't anxious. She was patient, calculated. Daniel noticed she was humming while doing dishes. He commented that she looked oddly cheerful. She smiled. Things change. He narrowed his eyes but didn't press. One morning, Maria received an email, job confirmation. A full-time opportunity with housing assistance for single women re-entering the workforce. She stared at the screen, fingers frozen, heart thudding. This was it. The door. Wide open. She waited another week. Not because she doubted, but because she wanted to leave on her terms, not his. With grace. With dignity. She wrote a letter. Not an apology. Not an attack. Just a timeline, dates, duties, and note at the end. "You said I was a free maid, but I was never free. And I was never yours to degrade." She placed the letter inside a folder with a flash drive. Titled it Care Transition Plan. She listed names of caregivers, their availability, insurance information. She wasn't going to abandon him. She was just done being deceived. On the final evening, Maria made his favorite meal, rosemary chicken with mashed potatoes and sautéed spinach. She served it without a word. Daniel looked surprised but pleased. "You're not mad about earlier?" he asked, chewing. Maria tilted her head. "What would I be mad about?" He chuckled, then shrugged. "Just figured you were acting weird." She nodded. "Maybe I was." She didn't speak for the rest of the night. Daniel fell asleep in his chair. Maria sat on the couch beside him, watching the clock. The room was silent, peaceful. When she rose, she didn't look back. Maria left just before sunrise. Her bag was light. She only took what she needed. The letter and the flash drive were left on the kitchen table, placed neatly beside his morning pill organizer. No dramatics. No final speech. Just quiet closure. She walked away with no intention of returning. By the time Daniel woke up, she was already halfway across the city. She didn't answer when he called. Or the second time. Or the sixth. She let it ring. Then silence. Then messages, some angry, some panicked, some pretending nothing was wrong. She deleted each one without listening. At the job center, she checked in. Signed forms. Handed over IDs she hadn't used in years. A woman named Renee greeted her like she'd known her forever, guiding her to a dorm-style temporary room in the attached housing unit. Clean, quiet, hers. Later that afternoon, she tied her apron, stepped into the bakery kitchen, and started her first official shift. The hum of mixers, the soft rhythm of dough being kneaded, the scent of cinnamon rolls in the oven. It was all so different from the sterile silence of home. She wasn't answering bells. She wasn't waiting to be barked at. She was working, moving, thinking, creating. Customers praised her pastries. Nadine gave her a thumbs up after the second batch. Maria didn't smile for attention. She smiled because she meant it. Daniel called again that night. Voicemail. He left a message, voice cracking, asking where she'd gone and when she was coming back. He said he was confused. Said he missed her. Said he needed her. Maria sat on her cot, phone in her lap, watching the red light blink. She didn't play the message. She already knew what he'd say. None of it mattered anymore. The next morning he texted, "This place is a mess without you." She turned off notifications. 2 days later, a legal envelope arrived at her old address, forwarded to her new location. Inside, a short notice from Daniel's attorney. No contest on separation. No assets were disputed. No resistance. Just silence and signatures. She breathed easier. At the bakery, she was promoted to full-time after 2 weeks. Customers started requesting Maria's lemon bread by name. She stayed late to experiment with ingredients, tried new fillings, scribbled notes in the back of a composition notebook she bought for $2. The manager asked if she'd consider a permanent position. She said yes, without hesitation. Daniel's brother messaged her on social media. She didn't reply. He messaged again. "He's asking for you. Says he made a mistake." Maria blocked him. One night, after a long shift, Maria walked to a nearby park. It was empty except for a jogger and a stray cat curled near a bench. She sat down and closed her eyes. The breeze touched her face, soft and unfamiliar. For the first time in years, she didn't have to listen for someone calling her name. She didn't have to justify where she'd been. Her silence belonged to her now. She thought about the word freedom. People always described it as exhilarating, a rush. But this felt different. It wasn't a thrill, it was peace. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that wraps around you like a blanket and says, "You're safe now." Daniel's final voicemail came 2 weeks later. She listened just once. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. I was just stupid. I miss you. I really do. Please come back. Please." She didn't save it. Back at work, Maria was asked to train a new hire. A younger woman, curious and shy, always apologizing for mistakes. Maria was patient. She corrected her gently, gave tips, shared stories. The girl said, "You're really good at this." Maria didn't know whether she meant baking or teaching. Maybe both. Later that night, Maria looked through her notebook. Scribbles had turned into recipes. Notes had turned into margins full of ideas. A colleague suggested she start a side hustle, cakes for events, weekend orders. Maria laughed at first. But that night, she designed a flyer. She didn't use her old last name. She signed it, Maria Rose, Artisan Bakes. The first order came within days. A small wedding cake. Simple but elegant. Maria poured herself into it. Not to prove anything, just to feel alive. When the bride saw it, she cried. Not from disappointment, but joy. Maria cried later, too. Quietly. Not because she was sad, but because someone had looked at her work and called it beautiful. She didn't think of Daniel often anymore. But when she did, it wasn't with hatred. It was with distance, like remembering a bad dream after waking up. Once, in the middle of folding parchment paper, she wondered how long he had faked the limp. How long he had tested her love by pretending to need her. But she didn't dwell on it. There was no satisfaction in knowing. The closure wasn't his apology, it was her absence. At a staff meeting, her manager brought up a possible expansion. A second location. New faces. New recipes. He turned to her. If you had your own space, what would you name it? She didn't hesitate. The Quiet Spoon. Everyone laughed softly at the name, but Maria meant it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was steady, comforting, honest. The bakery offered her a small bonus for outstanding performance. Maria used part of it to buy a new pair of shoes and the rest to order custom cake boxes with her logo. Her hands still carried the fatigue of years, but now that fatigue meant something. She no longer introduced herself as a caregiver. She was Maria Rose. And she was just getting started. 6 months passed. The walls of Maria's new apartment were still bare, but it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. There were no machines humming through the night, no urgent alarms, no resentment hiding under polite smiles. Her morning started with strong coffee and the smell of rising dough, not whispered insults dressed as jokes. Her name was slowly spreading in the community. Small business owners mentioned her in their newsletters. Local moms tagged her in social media posts about birthday cakes. Word of mouth traveled faster than any ad. She'd opened a part-time stand at the weekend farmer's market. She brought 3 kinds of bread, lemon tarts, and something new each time. One week it was pistachio cookies. The next, banana chocolate muffins. Each Saturday, she sold out faster. A middle-aged couple asked if she did catering. She said she hadn't yet. They offered a deposit. She said yes. That night, she took out the old composition book, flipped through pages full of flour-smudged notes, and began planning a menu. She worked late, but she didn't feel drained. Her exhaustion now had a rhythm. It wasn't pulled from her by someone else. It was earned.
Nadine dropped by the stall one Saturday.
She looked around, impressed. "You ever think of going bigger?" she asked. Maria smiled. "I used to think small was all I could handle. Now I'm not so sure." Back at home, Maria looked through an online portal she had bookmarked months ago, a listing for vacant kitchens for rent. She found one near her apartment. Clean, well-lit, affordable. She scheduled a visit. The space was plain, but something about it sparked a vision. She walked through it slowly, imagining shelves of ingredients, racks of tools, the smell of cinnamon and vanilla in the air. She signed the paperwork the next day. A week later, her logo was on the door. The Quiet Spoon, by Maria Rose. Business picked up. She hired her first assistant, a single mom who needed flexible hours. Then a second. Her workspace was filled with quiet focus, laughter between batches, music playing low in the background. No one raised their voice. No one barked orders. It was everything her last 20 years had not been. One evening, she received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. "I don't know where you are, but I hope you're okay. I miss you. I realize now I was wrong. I was selfish. I thought your silence meant contentment. I thought I deserved you. I see now I didn't. I'm sorry for what I said. For what I did. I hope you find happiness, even if it's not with me." She folded the letter and put it in a drawer. She didn't burn it.
She didn't respond.
It wasn't necessary. His apology wasn't hers to carry. It belonged to him. Her peace didn't depend on his regret. The bakery began offering weekend workshops. Maria taught a dozen people at a time how to fold pastry dough or make proper vanilla custard. She was quiet, deliberate, warm. Her students listened carefully, took notes, laughed when she shared mistakes from her own learning curve. A young woman stayed after one class, said her mother had been a caregiver and lost herself. "You remind me of her. Only stronger," she said. Maria didn't say anything right away. Then, we forget we have lives, too. We're told service is noble. It is. But it doesn't mean self-erasure. The woman nodded, wrote it down. Later that night, Maria wrote a blog post. She titled it, "What They Don't Tell You About Being Devoted." It wasn't bitter, just honest. She talked about invisible labor, emotional neglect, and the danger of thinking loyalty means silence. It went viral within days. Caregivers from all over wrote to her. Women mostly. Some who had just left their situations. Some who hadn't yet. They said her words made them feel seen. Made them feel brave. Maria responded to every message. Sometimes with advice. Sometimes with just, "I hear you." A local news outlet picked up her story. From caregiver to culinary creator. They asked for an interview. She declined the on-camera portion, but offered to share her journey anonymously. The article ran with a photo of her hands dusted in flour, shaping dough. People lined up the next weekend outside the Quiet Spoon. She no longer felt like she was starting over. She had started. This was the middle of her story now, not the aftermath.
The core.
She bought a bicycle. Started riding in the mornings before the shop opened. She rode past the river, through quiet streets, breathing air she once thought she'd never taste alone. One morning, she passed a man in a wheelchair, sitting on a bench with a nurse beside him. She slowed down instinctively. He wasn't Daniel, but the moment still felt familiar. She stopped for a breath. Not from pain, just memory. Then she pedaled forward. The bakery expanded again. They added a second oven. Maria taught her assistants how to do inventory, how to plan for rush hours, how to teach others. She stepped back slowly, not because she was tired, but because she trusted the system she had built. She started writing a book. Not a memoir. A guide for women starting from nothing. She called it Starting from Empty Hands. It wasn't just about baking. It was about rebuilding without bitterness. About boundaries. About breath. Her face was never on the cover, but her spirit was on every page. One night, she received a message from someone she hadn't spoken to in decades. An old friend from culinary school. They'd assumed she'd dropped off the map. "I'm glad you came back," they wrote. "I didn't come back," she replied. "I found the road again." At the year mark, she stood outside the bakery before opening. Looked at the street, at the sky, at the people starting their day. She wasn't waiting for anyone to call her name. She wasn't answering to anyone but herself. The silence wasn't hollow. It was hers. She unlocked the door and began again.